The much-talked-about French Middle East Peace Conference opens today, and even though the Obama administration only remains in power until the end of this week, outgoing U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will be there.
Without either the Israelis or the Palestinians present, the conference wasn't going to resolve the decades-long conflict. Instead, its major goal has been to show international unity around an increasingly fragile two-state solution. In a closing statement, the 70 participating nations reaffirmed their commitment to separate states based on UN-recognized 1967 borders and called on both sides to abstain from unilateral actions.
What's striking here is the shared vision about the essential elements, the insistence on the two-state solution, the rejection of violence, and end to the settlements.
During the course of my presidency has gotten so substantial that it's getting harder and harder to imagine an effective, contiguous Palestinian state. And I think it would have long-term consequences for peace and security in the region, and the United States, because of our investment in the region and because we care so deeply about Israel, I think has a legitimate interest in saying to a friend, this is a problem.
This conference is one of the last gasps of yesterday's world. Tomorrow will look different, and tomorrow is very near.
That world begins on January 20th with the incoming Trump administration. Donald Trump has taken stances in favor of settlements and has promised to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
Well, the timing is certainly significant. French diplomats have indicated that this has been deliberately scheduled just days ahead of the inauguration of US President-elect Donald Trump, so the international community can give him a collective push for peace when he takes office. Certainly, they want to send a very strong message, a strong warning to him even, that the two-state solution is the only way to end the conflict in the Middle East.
Fatah spokesman Osama Kouasme is vowing that the Palestinian people will never allow U.S. President Trump to relocate the diplomatic compound, but that if he goes ahead and does it, that it will open the gates of hell in the region and the entire world. The Palestinians are also threatening that if any such transfer does actually take place, they will discuss several means of retaliation with Arab countries, including withdrawing recognition of the State of Israel. Ramallah insists that the move is tantamount to official acknowledgement by Washington of Israeli sovereignty over the city, including areas the Palestinians claim for their future state. Despite Israel's strong record on the protection of holy sites in Jerusalem belonging to all faiths, Palestinian officials persist in the false claims that there will be a change of the status quo that would undercut access to Muslim areas. Meanwhile, the U.S. Senate is now taking action to bolster Trump's position by enacting fresh legislation demanding the Jerusalem Embassy Act finally be implemented. That bill called for the city to remain undivided and fully recognized as Israel's capital. It was passed by Congress back in 1995 and called on Washington to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem no later than May 31st, 1999. An Israeli tank destroyed a Hamas military post in the southern Gaza Strip this morning after Palestinian terrorists opened fire at IDF military forces from the other side of the border. The IDF spokesperson's office released a statement saying the retaliatory action was taken after the unknown assailants fired their weapons at Israeli soldiers who were conducting maintenance work on the security barrier separating the Jewish state from Gaza. No one was injured during the incident, although an IDF vehicle was damaged. According to sources in the Hamas-run territory, no Palestinians were wounded by the tank shells. The Israeli army immediately warned all agricultural workers operating in the area to leave their fields and seek shelter during the incident. There was a similar skirmish just last month when armed Palestinians also fired at IDF soldiers working on the border fence near the northern area of the Strip. No one was injured during that incident either. A huge smuggling operation is taking place under the Egyptian Sinai border, conducted by ISIS and Hamas despite pressure from Egypt. The Times of Israel is reporting that Hamas is refusing to crack down on the smuggling by ISIS through Hamas tunnels run by its members, because the activity has become a source of solid income for Hamas, which recently raised taxes on the goods being brought into the Strip by ISIS smugglers. For example, the import tax on a ton of cement jumped $25 from $35 to $60. Tax increases were also applied on fruits and vegetables, which went from $15 per ton to $35. Hamas then raises the prices when it resells these goods within Gaza. Hamas is clamping down hard on public protests against fuel shortages in Gaza, which both the Palestinian Authority and Turkey say they'll now try to help resolve. The Islamist leaders have little tolerance for dissent, and security forces have violently been dispersing demonstrations against the continuous power cuts in the Strip. Hundreds of people have reportedly been detained over the past several days in efforts by the Islamist rulers to prevent further demonstrations. Police have been firing shots in the air, and a number of journalists say they've been beaten. For weeks, the 2.2 million Palestinians living in the enclave have only had electricity for a few hours a day. Protesters waved posters of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Prime Minister Rami al-Hamdallah covered in shoe prints, which is considered a major insult in Arab culture, before setting them on fire. Arabic text accused both men of being murderers and the heads of gangs, and not heads of state. In response to the riots, the PA has now agreed to temporarily exempt the Hamas government from paying fuel tax for the next 3 months. Ramallah has also agreed to supply Gaza with enough fuel to allow the reopening of the Strip's sole power plant. In addition, after days of, quote, extensive efforts, Ankara has agreed to offer emergency assistance by shipping a large quantity of fuel. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh is expected to meet with Qatari leaders in the coming days to hold talks on a more long-term solution to the chronic energy shortage.
Venezuela's unpopular president blaming cheap oil for a national crisis. Nicolas Maduro announcing Sunday his country raked in a staggering 60% less hard currency in 2016 compared to the year before. In light of the news, he says he's got a new plan to prop up oil prices, replacing a standing deal by OPEC. But whatever that plan is, the president is playing his cards close to his chest for now. The country is currently suffering from a brutal recession, with many people struggling with shortages of basic food, as inflation drags down minimum wages, sparking violent crime. On Sunday, Maduro praised his people for their courage in 2016, a year the opposition spent trying to remove him before authorities stepped in.
In a further sign of Russia's long-term commitment to Syria, Moscow plans to upgrade and expand its naval and air bases in the country. Officials say Moscow will begin repairing a second runway at the Hmeimim Air Base near Latakia, while the Tartus naval base will be upgraded to handle bigger ships such as cruisers. Sources say Russia aims to cement its presence in the Arab country, where it is helping the government of President Bashar al-Assad combat an array of foreign-backed militants and Takfiri terrorist groups. Russia, Iran, and Turkey are preparing for peace talks in the Kazakh capital, Astana.
Tensions are running high in the Balkans after a train painted with Serbia's national colors and signs reading "Kosovo is Serbia" was blocked from entering Kosovo. The train was heading for northern Kosovo, home to a Serb minority who do not recognize the Kosovo government. Serbia's President Tomislav Nikolic said the move shows that Kosovo wants war with his country. He warned that Belgrade would defend its territory and people, including minority Serbs in Kosovo. This is while Kosovo's prime minister says the train was sending a message of occupation. Kosovo declared independence from Serbia back in 2008, but Serbia still considers it part of its territory.
You know, I have to protect the Filipino people. It's my duty. And I tell you now, if I have to declare martial law, I will declare it. I will declare martial law to preserve my nation, period.
Some 25 U.S. lawmakers have now said they will not attend Donald Trump's inauguration ceremony scheduled for Friday in the aftermath of a clash between the president-elect and civil rights activist and Georgia Congressman John Lewis. In an interview released last Friday, Lewis said he doesn't see Trump as a legitimate president due to Russia's interference in November's election.
I think the Russians participated in helping this man get elected, and they helped destroy the candidacy of Hillary Clinton. I don't plan to attend the inauguration. It will be the first one that I miss since I've been in the Congress. You cannot be at home with something that you feel that is wrong.
Trump fired back the day after through Twitter, calling Lewis all talk and no action. This caused several Democratic lawmakers, including representatives from California and Wisconsin, to change their minds and decide not to attend the inauguration ceremony. Many of those who announced their absence said they instead plan to participate in the Women's March on Washington on Saturday, an event aimed at defending the rights of women. Alongside the Women's March, some 30 anti-Trump groups have also applied for protest permits during the inauguration weekend, and thousands of protesters have already begun rallies in 50 U.S. cities to rally against Trump's anti-illegal immigrant and Muslim ban pledges.
Obama has ordered the general over the D.C. National Guard to basically stand down the day of the event and is firing him or canning him the morning of the inauguration so that the National Guard will be leaderless. And we also ask the question, who's right under that general? Perhaps it won't be leaderless, but the National Guard is protesting. D.C. District Councilmen are protesting. Even Democrats are saying this is incredibly dangerous. While you have George Soros, Bill Ayers, and others admittedly sending in tens of thousands of agitators whose admitted goal is to, quote, shut down the inauguration. Then you add to this Rosie O'Donnell coming out, who's definitely on the inside, saying we need martial law, a national emergency declared, and a suspension of the election of Trump while it's investigated and while his Russian ties are looked at.
The Russians may have intended with their hacking has made it much more difficult to get to where they want. There's now a big impediment. When you hear General Mattis today, Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, almost swearing that they're going to be hardliners on Russia,
Human Rights Watch just released the World Report for 2017, and it takes aim at incoming U.S. President Donald Trump. In its annual report on human rights threats, the nonprofit non-governmental organization said the U.S. and the president-elect pose a human rights risk. Human Rights Watch Executive Director Kenneth Roth linked Trump and his supporters in the U.S. to European far-right parties, gaining popularity through divisive policies and rhetoric. According to the group, these parties justify violating human rights because they claim the public accepts it as necessary. The report also took aim at several strongman leaders in Russia, China, the Philippines, and Turkey, and said the rise of populist leaders in the U.S. and Europe allows abuse from other leaders worldwide. The group says in order to protect human rights, the government must dedicate themselves to rejecting intolerance.
A vote to leave the European Union could have material economic effects on the exchange rate, on demand, and on the economy's supply potential, could lead to a materially lower path for growth and a notably higher path for inflation than in the central projections set out in today's monetary or inflation report.
View of the committee, but I think that the financial stability risks around that process are greater on the continent than they are for the UK.
Here we are seeing the head of the Bank of England pulling quite a 180. If before the referendum it was doom and gloom predictions, then today, 7 months after the vote actually took place, he's saying things are not so bad and that the financial threat or risks are actually something that Europe is going to be facing and not the UK, according to Carney. And of course, this is quite a major U-turn.
Troubling increase. The TSA says its agents detected thousands of guns in travelers' carry-on bags in 2016, and a large percentage were loaded.
I think the hustle and bustle of traveling is stressful. Well, consider the pressure on TSA agents, where even one slip-up could be devastating. In 2016, agents intercepted 3,391 guns from making it through security and onto planes across the U.S. and the TSA says 83% of those firearms were loaded.
The number one excuse that we hear is that they forgot that they had it with them. The second most common excuse we hear is that their wife or husband packed their bag, and I'll tell you what, neither of those excuses fly.
Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International is at the top of this undesirable list. 198 guns were found in carry-ons there. Here in Baltimore, the number is significantly lower. These are 3 of the 24 guns seized here in 2016, and that figure has steadily increased to its worst level in 4 years.
Cybersecurity attacks becoming more sophisticated every year, and now the FDA issuing a warning about the healthcare industry, saying certain heart devices are vulnerable, allowing hackers to get in and modify programming commands. This could lead to potential battery depletion and inappropriate pacing or shocks.
Now, all Internet of Things devices, the more connected we become, the more dangerous it can potentially be. But when you're talking about medical devices, now you're talking about something that can potentially be deadly. And some of these devices are at great risk if they're not updated, if they're not maintained properly, and there's various points in which hackers can find vulnerabilities in the system and do exactly what you said. They can cause a pacemaker's battery to drain, or they could do something else that could cause grave harm to a person.
You know, what about having these companies teaching the employees who input so much of this sensitive patient information into the digital medical systems, you know?
Well, most Americans drive every day, and some of them drive for a living, a lot of them actually, from cabbies to truckers to bus drivers. Literally millions of Americans earn a living behind the wheel, but the driverless car will kill these jobs. Recently, Uber's driverless cars hit the streets of Arizona at the invitation of Governor Doug Ducey. In the majority of states, 29 out of 50, the single most common job is driving for a living. And I believe in this country, it's the single most common job for men with a high school diploma. So this is millions and millions of people who are going to be out of work if this technology proceeds, as it apparently is. Why should government be making it easier for this technology to make people unemployed?
Well, I don't think that it's government that's making it easier. What government is doing, what we're doing in Arizona, is simply getting out of the way. This is technology that hasn't been proven out yet, but you can either embrace this technology as a state, or you can try to shut it down. And in Arizona, we're going to be welcoming to new ideas.
Okay, so the Obama administration has been subsidizing this through the Department of Transportation, and so they have every reason to pretend there's no downside. And yet a White House report from last month acknowledged that a lot of this country's most vulnerable employees are going to be out of work, and that it will, pardon me, increase income inequality. That's their position on it. So even they're admitting that.
At least 3 people were found dead in Japan on Sunday, and more than 300 were injured in weather-related accidents over the weekend. According to Kyodo News Agency, temperatures plunged to the lowest levels so far this winter as heavy snow hit central and northern parts of Japan. Now, the mercury dropped well below freezing in many areas, including in the city of Oshu in Iwate Prefecture, which plunged to minus 16 degrees Celsius. Now, parts of the country, as you can see in the video there, saw over 2 meters of snow as of Sunday. Over 130 flights were cancelled, and some venues for Japan's annual college entrance exam had to delay the test starting time. Japan's weather agency has warned of more snowstorms in parts of Japan through Monday.
Come here, Johnny. Come on.
When Angel, a greyhound mix, was rescued from an animal organization in Ireland, she would not turn around and face her new home. Paws Animal Rescue believes she was traumatized and abused. When Angel arrived at their organization, they say that she just faced the wall in their office and refused to move for days. They would leave food and Angel would only eat when no one was watching. After bringing in another dog from the same pound, they immediately saw a change in Angel's personality. The nonprofit says that they assumed it was her brother and named him Cliff. Angel suffered from mange, and Paws Animal Rescue believed that there would be long-term psychological problems. But now, 6 months later, her personality has completely changed, and she's found her voice. And a forever home. After a couple just lost their 2 dogs, they fell in love with Angel, and they say that she's doing great.